And I've been in groups where of people who've lived in Japan and they've claimed that Japan is racist, Japan doesn't like foreigners. But at the same time, it's like, are you making an attempt? And in that, you have a lot of foreigners that act very privileged or they act very spoiled. It's kind of like they expect the Japanese to learn English and expect. That's why I always say be careful who you vote in office, because you don't know what politicians may put whatever policy that could hurt Japan significantly. But in a nutshell, Konbanwa minasan. Kyo desu. Immigration is a topic that I've talked about countless times on this channel. But for those of you who don't know my stance, I figured I'd talk about it here. Seeing as Japan just opened its borders to the rest of the world, I figured this would be a great topic since Japan is opening herself up again. I love Japan dearly. It's a country I fell in love with when I was in high school. And I want nothing more than Japan to succeed as a country and the Japanese to succeed as a people. With that being said, with anything you love, you want to make sure that people are treating that place, person, or thing correctly. And of course, since Japan is a country, there are types of people I wouldn't want to be in Japan, including my home country, the United States of America. I don't like foreigners who enter a country and don't try to assimilate to the country's culture. This is a problem we have in America, specifically with Latin Americans or people from Latin countries or Spanish-speaking countries, is that they come to America. And it's really worse where I live in South Florida because we have a huge Hispanic community. But one thing I don't like is when people travel or move to a new country, but they don't attempt to try to learn the country's language. They don't try to understand the country's culture and try to adapt or assimilate to that culture. And one problem I know that Japan faces is that they have a lot of foreigners who don't try to learn Japanese and don't try to understand Japanese culture. And in that, you have a lot of foreigners that act very privileged or they act very spoiled. It's kind of like they expect the Japanese to learn English and expect the Japanese to cater to their needs. But seeing as the nature of Japan is that it's a country that has been isolated from the world for a majority of its life, it really wouldn't make sense for the Japanese to really accommodate foreigners, since it's only really in the recent century that Japan has opened up to the rest of the world. And I think having those type of gaijin in Japan would make the Japanese a bit more uncomfortable, because it's like you decided to move here, but you have no intent on learning our language. And what happens is, and it happens in different countries as well, is that a lot of people who come from their home country, they oftentimes live in communities that are similar to their own country. So for example, in Japan, you have a lot of foreigners that tend to hang out in spaces where they speak English. So for them, there's no incentive to try to learn Japanese because they're already living comfortably speaking English. And I think it's wrong, because you can't really fully immerse yourself in a country unless you really learn its language, because the culture of the country does affect the language. And actually learning a language, you actually learn a lot about how the people think, the history of the country, and etc. And to me, again, it's very interesting how people can decide by their own choice to move to a different country and then complain about how Japan is not catering to foreigners. But I think it starts with you. I think you as a person, you have to do your best to make sure that your standard of living or the way that you're living is comfortable. And with that, learning the country's language would definitely help you in that. But I don't think if you went to a certain country on your own terms, that the country should be obligated to cater to you. That's the decision you made. And I think with every choice you make, you have to deal with the challenges and consequences that come with that. And with living in Japan, seeing as Japan is not really a melting pot and Japan is majority 98% homogenous, it's gonna be very hard to try to live in Japan when you haven't really learned the language, learned the culture, etc. And I've been in groups where of people who've lived in Japan and they've claimed that Japan is racist, Japan doesn't like foreigners. But at the same time, it's like, are you making an attempt to learn Japanese? Are you making an attempt to understand why the Japanese do what they do, the history of the country? Or it's because you're so spoiled that you want to be treated a certain way, then you're not getting it. You just automatically assume or call Japan racist. And I think what separated me from a lot of foreigners or other foreigners I've talked to was the fact that I did my best to try to relate to the Japanese people. I adopted a lot of mannerisms. I studied about the culture for years. I tried my best to not make myself stand out. And I think that mentality that I had to connect with people and try to not be American, but try to be more Japanese, I think that mindset gave me the success that I got, because I've made lifelong friends and family. Everyone I stayed with who hosted me loved me, and they begged me to come back. And I truly never really had that much negative experience when I traveled to Japan. Really and truly, I think anything that has to do with immigration can be explained through if you just go to the bare minimum of a society, which is the family or your house. If I travel to a friend's house or a person invites me to their house, I'm gonna have to obey by the house's rules. If that person doesn't want me to wear shoes in the house, I won't wear shoes. If I'm staying at a house and they don't want me outside at a certain time, I have to obey the rules. I'm not saying you have to accept every cultural stigma or rules or societal rules about Japan, but how can you expect the Japanese to try to accept you if you're not even trying to make an attempt to connect with the Japanese? To me, that doesn't make sense. So if you're going to another person's house, you have to obey the rules and the culture of that household. Same applies to a country. And this is a topic that I'm very concerned about, seeing as Japan, it's been a lot of talks in government to open Japan's borders to basically welcome a lot more foreigners. And I've said this on countless videos in the past, I think a lot of Japan's social issues need to be fixed internally, because I think it's pretty non-smart or negligent to try to have foreigners fix Japan's problems, because in a way you're giving power to foreigners than to the Japanese people. That's why I always say be careful who you vote in office, because you don't know what politicians may put whatever policy that could hurt Japan significantly. But in a nutshell, I prefer foreigners who want to live in Japan, to love Japan, to know about the culture, to try to learn the language, to try to connect with the people. They don't try to treat Japan like their home country, but they recognize that it's a privilege to be in Japan. They're not there against their will. So it's best for them to try to assimilate and try to conform to the culture as much as possible so they can connect and have a better standard of living while doing that. Because honestly, that's the best you can do as a gaijin, as someone who is not from Japan, to make your life easier, because it's not the Japanese obligation to make foreigners feel as comfortable as possible. Though it would be nice, I think it first starts with the individual, then we can talk about the country once we trickle down that slope. But I think it starts with the person first. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, also hit that bell as well to get notified whenever we post a video. Hontou, arigatou gozaimasu. Minna, 気をつけて。じゃあね。